Hey everybody, we are so excited to be here today at the first Muse Townhall.
Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm one of the founders here at the Muse.
I'm Kathryn, one of the founders here at the Muse, and we're really excited to test this out. As you guys know, it is our 5-year birthday yesterday, so we're really excited to celebrate how far we've come. So we wanted to have this meeting both for Muse employees and also for our community, because we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of the people who have visited the Muse, used the Muse, worked with the Muse, read the Muse. So we are so grateful to you guys, and we wanted to spend the next I guess sort of 5 to 15 minutes talking a little bit more about the future, what's in store. We'll talk a bit about the past, where the Muse came from, and sort of a recap of the last 5 years, some of the biggest lessons learned, and then we'll do some questions.
Absolutely. And so don't be afraid to sort of send in your questions. Let us know what you want to hear. We're here for you.
Yeah. So one of the things we wanted to start with was just a little bit of the quick story of why the Muse started. It's a question that we get a lot, and I think particularly looking back on how far the company's come, being here in this office, surrounded by an incredible team, and thinking back to those early days when it was just a couple of us, and that original pain point that led us to found the Muse. So for Alex and I think the story is very similar, and yet there were different things that really drew us. For me, I met Alex working at McKinsey. We were management consultants, and I knew pretty quickly that I did not want to be a career consultant. I was committed to 2 years. I learned a ton, but I was like, all right, I got to do something else. And so as I started thinking about that next move, I ran headfirst into a wall of just terrible career products. I mean, terrible career products. One of the stories that I tell a lot, but I think it's really sort of emblematic of how frustrating the space is I was sitting in my office, in the middle of Manhattan, high-rise building, and I typed into one of the big job boards, business strategy director, and I hit enter, and a big, list of giant job descriptions popped up, job, and one of the top ones was assistant store manager, 7-Eleven, Secaucus, New Jersey. And I remember thinking, like, that's not what I searched for, that's not what I'm looking for, this platform doesn't know me at all.
And you do love Slurpees, and you love hot dogs.
That's all very true.
It knows that part, but in terms of search, it's not, the internet could do so much better.
Yeah, it felt like an absolute waste. And we started talking, well, what would a career site look like if we could design it? First of all, it wouldn't just focus on the active job searching, because your career is so much more than that. It would focus on how do you negotiate for a raise, or deal with a difficult boss, or position yourself to take on more responsibility at the office, or how do you even know what you want to do in the first place? And then when you are looking for that job, what if you could see inside companies, learn more about the employees that work there, your potential coworkers, and really get that inside scoop? And so ultimately, that's really the idea that led us to start the Muse, and that led us to sit down in a living room in Brooklyn, not too far from here, and start sketching out ideas on sheets of notebook paper about what this future could look like and how to build something that really helped take people by the hand and navigate them through a much more personal, authentic experience, and help them get to a career that they were really excited about.
Yeah, one of the things for us that's so key is we think about helping people no matter where they are in the process. And Kathryn was telling the story on her side. She realized this was something that wasn't a fit for her. On my side, it was. I was, developing the skills, trying to find my place, finding, how to navigate an internal, groups and politics and dynamics and clients, and getting promoted to manager faster than I was ready, and how do I learn how to do that, and realize that a lot of it was also, neither one of us could have known going in that this would have been a good or a bad fit, and that seemed like such a waste. Like, it could have been not a fit for me and have been a fit for Kathryn. And so many of our peers and friends and people we were hearing from had those same experiences. So we started with content because that was something we could do, one, cheaply with no money and living on our savings with no salary, but two, because it was something that we could really bring and leverage the expertise of a large network of people to bring the best of career advice, both for job seekers and non-job seekers. And then we built that out. We thought about that experience of how do you figure out if it's a fit before you join? And that's where our company profiles came from, that idea of having the photo and video, seeing inside a company, adding jobs. And actually remember there was an early time when we were looking for investors. It was very early days. And we had an investor that actually said, you guys should either do jobs. If you do jobs, do jobs. If you do content, do content. But don't do both. Kill one side and focus.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it was absolutely, it was actually devastating at the time, because we were maybe 5 people working out of an apartment really knew that this idea of combining great career advice, combining job search, pulling it all together had merit. And I was in the meeting and they were so excited about the idea for the Muse at first. And then as soon as they heard that word content, their heads dropped and they just said, yeah, they were like, I'll write you a check for $1 million right now if you promise me you'll kill all the content. And in that moment, it's like everything sort of narrows in, and it felt like it was this big decision, but in many ways it was really clear. The answer was no. We felt like we had to do both, and we could create a much better product by doing both.
And one of the things that we did was in terms of, oh, sorry, it sounds like I've lost my mic. Give me 1 second.
Time out.
Cool.
All right. Great. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Lost my mic.
Exactly. We're back. Hopefully you can hear us. Onwards with the story of how we grew.
So we sort of launched, we brought the company profiles and the jobs, and the most recent thing was actually end of last year. We ended up launching Coach Connect, which some of you may have seen at themuse.com/coaching. It's where we have all the best career coaches we've vetted and looked at, giving you reviews and a sense of like what you could use and help. And the reason that we ended up launching sort of more of a coaching platform actually was input from you guys. You sent us emails, you sent us tweets, you told us that you were stuck and needed, you got content helped you get from A to B, but maybe then you needed an extra push or an extra point of view. And so we did that, and we did surveys and talked to you guys at focus groups, and out of that came Coach Connect.
Yeah. So now I think when we look ahead, that's actually a great transition point to one of the big things that's next. So we'll spend the next sort of 5 minutes or so looking ahead towards what is in store, what's next for the Muse, what can you expect in the next 4 months of 2016, and looking ahead into early next year, as well as then turning it over for Q&A. So Coach Connect, I think one of the big things that we are excited about in terms of both the opportunities and the what's coming down the pipe at the Muse is a continued investment in professional development, coaching, classes, and in education. So we started with this idea to be the 360-degree everything you need for your career. And some of that, as Alex said, is content and is getting that advice, so that right perspective from someone at the right time. Some of that is helping you find jobs or explore different career paths, but a big piece of that is learning new skills or speaking with people that have been there before or that can provide an expert perspective. So we're really excited to ramp up coaching. We are adding more coaches. As you guys have probably seen on the Muse, we've got a ratings and review system. So I think the average rating is around 4.9 out of 5. But it makes sure that if you're going to spend time with somebody, that they're actually really excellent at what they do. Exactly, that they're worth it. So we started out with just offering resume reviews, career advice, kind of helping people get unstuck. Now we're expanding to management training, leadership training, negotiation coaching, and more.
Yeah, and this year we've already expanded a lot of content to cover more both specific groups like engineers or people trying to break into that field, working parents, older job seekers. Invested more in video, so they're on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, and doing more there and bringing advice to you in different mediums in the way that you want to see it, and bringing the expert advice of those coaches to our content. So whether or not you're working with a coach, you're benefiting from the best of the best.
Yeah, and then finally, one of the things that I think is really going to help our growth going forward is that, as some of you guys may have seen, and as everyone here at the Muse definitely knows, we announced that we raised our Series B earlier this year. That was really exciting for us. I think early on, when we were going up against the big classic job boards of the world, one of the things that was so hard is a lot of them have these massive resources, this sort of institutional footprint, and we were very much a David kind of going up against that Goliath. And I think that as we've really built our own traction, our own community, it's been really exciting to feel like we have the backing of investors and supporters that are really helping to invest in us to let us get to that next level. So as part of that, we've got a lot of things coming down the pipe. So Alex, want to kick us off from a product perspective of some of what we can expect to see in the next couple of months?
Yeah, absolutely. So going into 2017, there's a lot of different areas that we're focusing on, but one of the big ones actually is personalization, and helping make the Muse more into your Muse, and having each of you sort of have the experience and the content, the advice, the companies, the coaching, whatever it is that is best for both your needs in your career and where you are in that cycle of, are you trying to gear up for a promotion and trying to, build up those skill sets and prepare for that conversation? Or are you thinking about moving on to something else and figuring out what that is? And so, we're really both looking from a human perspective and talking to you guys and getting that input. We read every email you send us and all the tweets and all the messages. And also from a data perspective, where are you actually spending the most time? What is most engaging for you? And making sure we continue to bring you more of that. One of the things for us is that we really believe that everyone's unique and there's career issues aren't handled in a cookie cutter way. Not everyone should want the same things. And a lot of times that's actually a big part, I think, of growing into your own and your career is that you think you need to do something that your family, your peers, society, whatever it is, has sort of laid out. And then you start realizing what it is that you really want, and helping people get there is important to us.
Yeah. Another thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about before we turn it over to questions is this idea of growth. And part of that is being able to provide more. So more of everything, more content, more jobs, more companies, more coaching, more classes, really diversifying and expanding what we offer on the Muse. And one of the reasons I think it's actually important to talk about that in a forum like this is that we know, and we as a company know that we are still not doing the best job serving our community that we want to be and we could be. And part of that is just that there's areas where we're not there yet. So for example, we got an email a while back from somebody who was like, I love the Muse, I love your articles, I love your site, I love everything, but I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and you just don't have enough for me. And the only thing I can say to that is we're coming.
As soon as we can.
But I think for us, a big focus of the next 6, 12 months and beyond is how do we grow? How do we make sure that if you are using the Muse in San Francisco or Chicago or New York or Atlanta, that you're having a fantastic experience. And if you're using us in Omaha or St. Louis or Portland, Oregon or
Minneapolis.
Yeah, exactly. Or I was going to say, Longview, Texas, that we have something for you too, and that it's not just limited to big cities. And so we're sort of expanding outward, going through these different hubs, and then starting to expand into the different cities. Also, from a kind of expansion perspective, we're definitely looking at industries. So that's something we've heard loud and clear is a lot of people love the sort of general career advice. So there's management, there's negotiation, but there's so much more than that. There's engineering specific career advice, which Alex talked about. There's marketing specific, sales specific, all sorts of different careers. How do you navigate both specific situations within an industry and also potentially specific situations that might happen in your life based on where you come from, who you are, etc. So we're doing a lot to really kind of invest in that and think about how do we both expand the type of articles we have and also, as Alex said, get it to you at really the right time. And then we're also using data so that we understand, what are the articles, the topics, the jobs, the companies, the coaches, the classes, etc. What are the things that are resonating to you specifically, and how do we then do the best possible job that we can of in the kind of an ocean of possibility of thousands of jobs, of articles, of all of this stuff, how do we say, okay, here's what we think is most relevant for you, and draw that dotted line so that you don't have to spend your time wading through piles and piles of stuff that's just not relevant. How do we help you hone in on the right things?
Yeah, and definitely, we always want to hear from you. You'd be surprised how many articles we publish every month that are questions that someone asked us that, weren't on our list and someone wrote in or asked a question. We said, we haven't covered that. That's a great idea, or suggestions. And so do not hesitate to engage with us, to share your thoughts. And we've built this for you. We work with each of you individually as you come in to help, and that's why we did Coach Connect, for example. We couldn't help all the people who wanted our personal help, for the two of us to help you guys resolve that. And so being able to actually say, what, we're going to actually find a way to make this scale to make sure everyone who wants that advice gets it. There's more things like that we'll probably be developing, but hearing from you will be a big piece of that.
Yeah. So I want to turn it over in just a second to Q&A to get both your thoughts on, so we've shared a little bit so far, What do you think about it? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Tell us, like, yes, this is great. No, that's terrible. Solve all these problems. Whatever it is, I think that we really want to hear from you. So, type your question in, ask us directly. Is there anything else that we should cover before we turn it fully over to the community?
Just that we're planning to do more of these. I mean, give us your feedback, but that's something we'd love to build into a regular rhythm with you guys to get a chance for you to both hear from us and how we're thinking about things, but also for us to hear from you.
Awesome. All right. Awesome. All right. So first question. Would love to hear some input from what's the psychology when you interview with HR. Things to avoid saying or things that might trigger the HR person or the recruiter to say next and toss your resume in the pile.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two ways I'd answer it. One, I think, is obviously it's really good to prepare, but when you are over prepared and only giving the cookie cutter response and not showing both your flexibility to adapt your answer to the question in the situation, but also your personality. I think sometimes that can sort of raise a question mark of, are they listening or are they just saying what they think I want to hear? And the other, at least for me personally as a recruiter, is I love people who are real and human and self-aware. And so some folks shy away from giving examples of things that didn't go great or where they made mistakes. And I think some of the best examples actually in interviews I've had are people who are able to tie this happened, good or bad, but this is actually what I learned and how I've evolved since is actually a really powerful narrative.
Yeah, I'll actually add to that as well that I think one of the challenges that a lot of people do in interviews is they tell you in adjectives what they are. I'm very detail-oriented, I'm very hardworking, I am this, I am that, but they don't show you. And one of the best ways to show an interviewer is through examples. So there was a time when this happened, as Alex said, I did this, this is how I reacted, this is what I learned, this is the situation. Or ideally, if you're a job that has numbers, I mean, it's nothing more powerful than saying, we came 10% under budget, and the 3 years when I wasn't in charge, we were 25% over budget. Whatever it is, anytime you can give specific examples, great.
Yeah. And that's what people talk about in the room after you leave. They tell those stories.
Exactly. All right, next question. Oh boy, okay. Jeffrey asks, now that you have the first 5 years under your belt, what is your vision for the Muse 5 years from now? This is a pretty exciting one. I think we talk a lot about what we want for this company, for the organization, for the people who work here, for the community, the site, the product, etc. And I think there's a few different ways to answer that, but one of the biggest for us is building the Muse into a globally known and loved brand. So what does it mean to be loved? I think that is that word, that idea of creating a product, a company, an organization that people really have an emotional connection to is really important to us, because when I was going through the job search process, again, 6 years ago or so now, it was incredibly frustrating to feel like all these sites were just highly transactional. Like, they don't give a crap about you, sorry. And it was just this incredibly soulless experience. And I think that's just wrong for a process that actually could be really enjoyable and aspirational and exciting with the right tools and the right partners. So in 5 years, I hope that everybody, not just in the United States, but in a much, much broader swath of the world, knows about what we do. I hope that we're able to continue to build a reputation not only as an amazing partner in place to navigate your career, but also that we have a reputation for being an amazing place to work. I think that'd be really important to the two of us.
Yeah. Next question is, what would you say are the key things companies recruiting are looking for in candidates? So other than the specific, I think, interview questions, I think there's definitely, trends in each industry around skills and areas that a lot of hiring is happening in. You've heard about that, and people think a lot about that as in terms of digital skills or engineering skills. And I don't think it's the only path, but I think it's really important to be on top of, for your industry, what is valued. We've hired marketers in the past who've at least taken, a class on the side in HTML and CSS, and that showed to me that they weren't scared to go out of their way, learn those skills, and be able to apply it in a different way. But that's also someone in a totally different field being like, I decided to learn a little bit about Photoshop, or I volunteer my time. So I think really looking beyond and thinking about where the future of your industry is going. And I think companies are also looking for candidates who want to work for that company specifically, right? Like, it's a big reason.
You literally just read my mind.
That's what I do most days. And I think that comes across in a couple ways. One, like, have you done your research? Are you sure you actually want to work there? You can even think of big companies in the same field, and they're not actually the same, right? Like working for L'Oreal versus Estee Lauder, or Uber versus Lyft, or McDonald's versus Taco Bell. Like, as you think about general brands, like they have different goals and companies and cultures. And so I think a really big piece of that is understanding why this company and why you. And I think that makes a big difference when you apply, and it comes out in your resume and in your cover letter. And then when you meet them in person, it comes out in the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question. Kevin asks, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in the first 5 years? Oh, man.
So many lessons.
Yeah, I was going to say there have been a lot. I think, I think that there's obviously a really big lesson about making sure that you surround yourself with great people. Something that we don't talk a lot about and that I won't spend a lot of time on here, but right before we started the Muse, when we were starting to explore what it might look like to create a community and an organization around career advice, we ended up working with people that just had a very different value system and ethics system than us, and it was a terrible experience. It was unbelievably just challenging, frustrating. I spent time on the floor in the fetal position. It was not pretty. Yeah. And it was I think that experience that really made us resolve, okay, for this company, we want to work with good people that treat others well, that are good
respectful
people. And we want to partner with good people. We want to work with good companies, and that there was just a certain basic system of core values that underpinned a lot of what we do, and that when you make compromises in that area, it's just not worth it. So I'd say that's one of the biggest lessons that we've learned.
So one of the questions here is, what are you most excited about that's on the roadmap for Q3, Q4 of this year? That's a great question. I think for me, Kathryn mentioned this a little bit, but one thing I'm excited that we're going to just be testing on a smaller scale to begin with, but based on your feedback and how you respond to it, I think could become bigger, is in the professional development area. So we've talked about Coach Connect and coaching, but we're going to start actually doing something similar on the classes front. Not developing our own classes yet, but actually working across, with great partners from across the industry to curate the very best classes that have already been incredibly well received, and that might be helpful to you. So you don't have to go and do all that work of like, I want to take an Excel class, now I need to look at 500 classes across 10 different sites, but actually that if it's here, it's been vetted, and that you can trust it. So I'm excited about launching that and seeing how you guys like it.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think I'm really excited about personalization. I know we talked about that a little bit, so I don't want to go too far into it, but for me, one of the opportunities and also the challenge of what we do is that, we have 50 million people a year who use the Muse, and they're so different. They live in different places. They're different ages, different genders, different functions, different backgrounds. They just care about different things. And so how can we get better and smarter about giving them an experience that is totally made for them, that is tailored for them, that kind of shows up and says, hey, from everything we know, this is exactly what you might be thinking about right now in your career. And obviously, we're never going to be perfect, so I don't want to aspire to magic, but I think that we have an opportunity to really increase that sense of like, wow, I was literally just thinking about this today, and then the Muse sent me a note about it, when I got home. That sense of creating an experience that's really unique to the people that are unique, that make up our community. So that's what I'm excited about.
Actually, I'm going to jump forward a couple questions because there's one that ties into this, which is around personalization. Someone asked, personalization is definitely huge. Can you talk a bit about how you're planning to do that through tech and as well as content diversification? So the content piece, I think, is continuing to sort of get feedback from you guys, as well as see where there's gaps or areas that might be interesting and start testing them and seeing how you guys react to them. And that's something where we look at both the broad reach of an individual article, but sometimes, that article might not be meant for everyone. And so if it's something we think is actually only going to help a smaller subset of our users, if it did really well with them and had great engagement, then that's also a success. On the tech side, though, I think there's a lot on the data front that's really interesting. So I always think about the nuance and complexity of a career path. That's actually an awesome and fun part of the challenge that comes with personalization. So, if you market to parents, for example, and someone has a 1-year-old, like you have a 17-year plan to be able to say, like, roughly at this time, you're probably at these milestones. And that's great, and that's easy, and that's linear. For career paths, you might have started a new job, and you might be looking again in 3 months because it really wasn't a fit. The company went under, the role was no longer needed, whatever it might be. Or you could be looking in 3 years, or you could spend 8 years there and be thrilled. So we don't want to put everyone on the same path, but being able to say, based on data, based on your behavior as well. If you're spending a lot more time on jobs, you might actually start getting a more personalized email that's bringing those jobs straight to you and making it easier. And if you're not spending time on jobs, then we're not going to flood your inbox with that. That's not going to be relevant or helpful. Yeah. So I think really seeing how we can incorporate both on-site via email, off-site, sort of bringing that experience to you. As Kathryn said, to make it a little bit more magic, the biggest, I think, pain point that we felt early on is people have to put so much work into their careers. And that's great, but also technology should be able to make that better and easier. You can order food, get a car on demand, but you still have to go out and find all the job listings yourself. That seems like we can do better.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add is that I think that there's also an opportunity for us to ask people questions, but only when we deserve the time that it's going to take them to answer. Yeah. One of my pet peeves, and I was going to say before we started the Muse, but honestly it's still sometimes a problem, is that these new products or sites will launch and they'll say, hey, spend 30 minutes filling out this questionnaire and then we'll give you something personalized. If I don't know if something's going to work, why, it's hard to spend all that time if you're not sure what the result is. So I also think that part of personalization for us will be saying in small bites, hey, answer a couple of questions about what you're looking for or give us a bit more information, and then we'll prove to you that we're worth the time by giving you a better experience and slowly improving that as we, both as we get better at it and as we figure out a way to do it that's really valuable and useful to the person on the other side of the computer.
So next question, you mentioned more leadership training and utilizing Muse Coach Connect experts. Are there plans to offer online video training to build out specific leadership skills?
Funny that you asked.
Great question. So yes and no, I guess is the answer. I think we're going to continue especially on the classes front, seeing what we can offer that other people host, having free videos that we're doing. We have some videos, short career advice being shared by Muse coaches that you guys can access for free on the site, via social, on our YouTube channel, however you want to consume it. And then I think it's also continuing to look and see if that's something that you guys really have a specific area that you want more specific leadership skills developed and no one else is doing it well, then that's something we'll take on and do ourselves.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Next question.
Darcy.
Oh man. Darcy asks, what's been the one hard choice or decision you made along the way in growing the business that has made you the most proud? Oh man. So there's a couple of different things that jump to mind.
Go first.
Obviously one is really early on, as we kind of alluded to with the, kill the content story. We got a lot of pressure to change what we were doing. In particular, it's almost like legend at this point, but I pitched 150 investors in the first 3 months, literally multiple meetings a day, and it was just no, with occasional you're crazy thrown in. And granted, some people were really nice and thoughtful, keep me posted, not right now. But we also had a lot of people who said this doesn't make sense. What's wrong with Monster? Nobody can beat LinkedIn. All of these things that I think we just believed to not be true, and so we had a lot of temptations like change this part of your business and I'll fund you, or let go of part of your vision for the company and it will make you more successful. And so I definitely think we're proud of not doing that, and it's obviously easier to say that now that we've gotten to a point where it's more obvious that it was a good decision. At the time, there were definitely moments where we had to ask ourselves are we crazy? Yeah, is this bad? And then I would say I think that there's been a lot of small decisions we've made to make sure that we're focusing as much on creating an incredible company to be part of and not just, a great business. And so it's not necessarily this one mammoth landmark decision, but it's, day in and day out. Do you hire the person that is really talented but also seems like they're going to be just terrible to everyone that they work with, or wait for somebody who is great at what they do and also just
even though you need the hire today.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a single decision that then you have to make over and over and over and over again to hold true to what you believe to be right.
And I think that's true. I think having a company culture and a set of core values that's really lived in the hard decisions. It's easy not to hire someone who would be a terrible colleague and not respectful to others when they're not a total rock star. And when they actually have all the skills you need, there's no other options. Those hard decisions is when you put in practice what you preach, and actions are so much more important than words in that. Next question is around surprises as entrepreneurs. Anything we can share? One is that you'll learn a lot more about things you don't think about at all than you expected. commercial real estate and leases, or employment law in multiple states, and like things that over time won't actually be something you're responsible for anymore and you have great teams for, but also it's not at all on your radar when you're starting, because all you're trying to do is not die. And that's all you focus on for a little while.
It's almost this idea of like, you have to develop a muscle of getting something presented to you, a problem that you've never encountered before, they have no context for, and within some period of time, usually it's at least 24 hours, sometimes it's 4 to 6 weeks, you have to get really smart on it, like figure things out, and then actually be able to make a decision. And the hard thing is, there's no answers at the back of the book.
Nope.
You don't know if it was a good decision or a bad decision until maybe later. And if that, it's only, well, we're still alive and we're doing even better, or, geez, that was actually really painful. But it's very difficult to deal with the uncertainty, but I also think to some extent it's that excitement of blazing a trail where nobody has gone before.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk a lot about is that our job is to grow faster than the business. Like, we 5 years ago were not equipped to run a nearly 120-person company that has raised nearly $30 million. We weren't. There was a lot we did know and a lot we were learning, but I think that's something we've continued to do. And people talk about lifelong learning, but I think it's in the moment, what do you need to learn next? Are you surrounding yourself with smart people, both inside the team and other entrepreneurs and experts outside the company, to make sure you keep leveling up as fast as the company is growing? So if you're thinking about doing that yourself, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. All right, back to the career advice. The next question is from Luis, and it's, do you have any tips on how to handle a second interview? What would I do differently than the first interview? This is a really, really good question, because I think that there's a lot of advice around the interview, but it's not always as clear how that applies to interview number 2. So the first thing I would say is find out before you come back in from a second interview, are you interviewing with the same people, with some of the same people, or completely different people?
Yeah.
It's totally okay to use some of the same stories, but try not to use all the same stories. It definitely
People talk.
Exactly. People will often get together after an interview and debrief on how it went, whether everyone is, yes, let's hire this person, or no, I'm not sure. And so if everyone's saying, yeah, I heard the same story, that can obviously sometimes count in your count against you. So I would say think through, is there a new framing to put on a similar story? Can you take what you learned in the first interview and incorporate that in the second interview to be even more thoughtful about how you demonstrate that you specifically are a good fit for that role? And can you also then go kind of a bit deeper, a bit above and beyond? People love when you've done research in between the first and the second interview to show that you've really followed up on questions you were asked that you maybe didn't have a good answer to. So you're just going above and beyond.
Yeah, I've seen that myself as well. So in hiring product managers for my team and having people say between the phone call or the first interview and coming in, being like, this came up and I actually looked at a couple competitors and it's interesting. Like, I noticed this, and then it can even come out in your questions and not necessarily in your examples, and saying, the difference between a candidate that comes in and asks us, why did you start the Muse, or how did it start, which I'm happy to answer, but it's literally all over the internet, versus someone who actually was like, I read this article about the company and I was curious about this specific thing you said. That to me shows preparation, it shows foresight, it shows thoughtfulness. I think that's how you really stand out.
All right, next question is from Megan. She asks, what industry do you find is booming from your experience, and what role and field do you see the most placement in 2016? This is both very straightforward and, as I say, not entirely, in that obviously people with technical skills are hugely in demand. So we definitely see a lot of companies are hiring for obviously engineers, but also roles that might not traditionally be thought of as always technical, but that have a technical component. So whether that's a marketer with some sort of HTML or other technical skills, people who are sales support engineers sometimes sit between. Product is another role that some of those people come with a deep technical background, others acquire technical skills. So I think for many industries, spending the time, whether it's coding classes, weekends, taking time off, doing it, sort of nights and weekends in your existing workday, but that's obviously a very, very helpful thing. We see a lot of demand for sales roles right now. It feels like a lot of companies are really investing in growing out sales teams, both inside sales and outside sales.
Yeah, and for that one, that's great as well. A lot of companies have programs, like we actually have this internally, where we have an SDR, sales development rep program, where you don't actually need sales experience, just real desire for career in sales, and then you actually get training on the job, versus sometimes there's more senior roles where you need to have sold before. So that's always a great entry point. But like with anything else, you want to do the research, make sure you actually really want to be in that field. I think the other thing generally that's been interesting is, I think compared to 5 or 10 years ago, industry specialization was a lot more important at the time. You sort of have done healthcare, you continue in healthcare. You've done tech, you continue in tech. Here I think it's more skill specialization. And so, a specialized marketer, whether or not you have a technical background, but it might be that you know a ton about SEO, or that you've actually helped a company grow in a certain area, or it could be on an editorial side, but you've done high volume editorial, and you've done that in a magazine world, but now actually you might be able to translate that to digital, or help someone else. You could have worked on a production team in advertising and then moved to a production team in a different field. So I think always think about those transferable skills. And when you think actually about your resume, that's a really great point as well, is tell the stories in a way that they can see how the skills could impact another field. Switching industries and careers is just so much more common now.
Yeah, actually the one thing I'll add to that is communication.
Yes.
I think as people's career paths become that much more eclectic, the ability to communicate, whether that's in writing, whether that's verbally, is so important across a lot of different roles, because it's one of the things that both helps you communicate why you can be the right person to get the job, but also will allow you to be a really effective collaborator. And so it's interesting. I mean, I've seen some people who are not necessarily as comfortable with communication sign up for improv classes
or Toastmasters,
or just be part of certain online communities that don't necessarily cost anything and can be done from your couch, but that just help people become more comfortable communicating their points in a fairly concise, straightforward manner. So that's just a skill that probably will never go out of style.
Yeah. Next question is from Haran. How did you like Y Combinator? What's the most important lesson that you learned there? It's a great question. We went through, so Y Combinator is a technical accelerator program in Silicon Valley. It's incredibly prestigious, and we actually did not believe there was any chance of us getting in when we applied. And then we're massively surprised because we just didn't fit the mold of what they used to invest in at the time, and that's changed a lot. I think for me, one of the most important lessons was to really have focus and tie things back to how, we've always been very user-driven, user-centric, and tie that back to how we're helping people and how do we get that out as fast as possible. So we were developing this incredibly complex, we thought it was simple, but incredibly complex prototype of the company profiles, and we wanted to bring in all these data feeds and all this different stuff. And we were just pushed to just launch already. Get it out there. Hearing from people is what's going to tell you if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And actually, I think one of the mistakes a lot of companies make, startups or not, is they invest 6 months into a big project, and once it launches, it's really hard to pull the plug on it. It's really hard to say, you know what, we got it wrong. It's really hard to evolve it because you've gotten so tied into it. But if you can launch a start of something in 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks, depending on your company and your scale, and then learn and evolve from that, it's a lot easier to say, you know what, we thought they were going to really like this piece of it, but what's taken off is this other area, and really hear from people instead of having that sort of blinders up. So that's been a great lesson for us.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless anybody has any desperately important last questions, you probably have about 30 seconds to ask them now.
Yeah. And we didn't skip any, right? Early on.
Yeah, I think we got
cool.
through everything. So awesome. We're speedy. Go us. This is great, actually. I think we internally are going to be circling up on this, kind of figuring out, okay, what is the right cadence, method, format to do more of these hopefully in the future. We're really excited, I think, to just continue engaging with you guys. And we have a lot of forums already where we're hearing from our community. So a lot of people write into our email, people will tweet at us, write us on Facebook. All of that is so helpful. And as Alex mentioned earlier, that's where a lot of our best content comes from. It's people who reach out or raise their hand and say, hey, I have a question. I don't know the answer to this. And then we go, not necessarily to ourselves, but we go find an expert, tap somebody, and create something amazing. So please keep giving us your questions. Please let us know what, from what we've talked about, what excites you, what frustrates you, what would you change if you could change anything about the career process, the job search process, getting promoted, managing people, whatever your specific situation is. We want to hear about it, and we're excited to keep sharing more information as we go along.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is just a thank you. You know, it's been 5 incredible years. I can't believe it's been 5 years already. There's so much more ahead of us. We're just scratching the surface, but we wouldn't be here without you guys. And so whether you found us yesterday, randomly on Twitter today because someone retweeted something, or whether you've been a proud Muser for years, I just want to thank you for being here, for engaging with us, for engaging with your career, for daring to dream for something a little bit more exciting or getting to that next level, and for inspiring all of us to do what we do.
We've got lots more in store, so definitely kind of, hold on to your socks and come along with us for rides. So we're super excited.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.